Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you're listening to Get In. Yep, Get In. This is all about conversation, timely, relevant, and meaningful conversations. Don't we all need that? Human connection. I'm the creator and founder of Nia Technique, a global body and life movement art that's been changing people's lives since 1983. And I love getting into conversation with people that are on the forefront of changing people's lives. Today, we dive deep into the heart of transformation, embodiment, and the wisdom of living awake, your body. Today's guest is a woman whose, I'm going to say her body, life, and work, it truly embodies this show about getting in and about conversation, about truth and reality. Sarah Marshank. She is the founder of Selfistry, which is a very unique, integrative system that invites us all to deepen our relationship, first and foremost with ourselves, our bodies, and also the cosmos. Gotta like that, right? Gotta like the oneness connection, the universal connection. She is the author of Being Selfish. Now, when I first heard about this book years ago, Being Selfish, I went, okay, I want to read that book. Maybe you have an attitude around what it means to be selfish, you're going to get a different framework. This is a journey from escort to monk to grandmother. Escort, monk, grandmother. That's a path I want to hear about, right? She's known for her uncanny ability to sense the needs, the sensitivities, and the concerns of others. And she has this great skill to draw people into their very own transformational process with precision, an organic precision and grace. Now, get this, after spending 10 years in solo spiritual retreat. Now, think about that. Maybe you've gone on a silent retreat. Now, 10 years, 10 years in a solo spiritual retreat, not in a monastery and not following a single path, but in a deeply personal, embodied self inquiry. And what resulted is she emerged with a vision. Not for perfection or for enlightenment, but for what it truly means to be human. Her body, she realized at some point, was an obstacle to awakening. But then she discovered no, the body is the gateway. It's the gateway, it's not an obstacle. In a world where more and more people today are identifying not with necessary specific religions, spiritual aspects, not religious. Most people, myself included, we keep searching for meaning amid the chaos and the division that we're experiencing in today's world. Sarah's work in Selfistry provides a grounded, innovative, and accessible path to wholeness. She teaches, leads retreats, consults with organizations worldwide, and she's bringing her voice today. Who am I, really? She captures what I love, the spirit of women supporting women. Not that she doesn't work with men, but women supporting women. And supporting visionaries like myself, holding space for each other. She is a woman that holds a vision. She's rooted and radiant. She is someone who stands in her light. She understands sacred living and sisterhood. She knows what it means to hold space and share power. She is one of those visionary women rising, meaning continually rising. It's not something you start and it just doesn't end. It is the Sarah and the beanstalk that keeps on climbing. She understands the words "Together we rise." She understands the feminine way. She understands creating a circle of her. And she understands that the space between us is something that we can use together to evolve together, not as dependent human beings, but independent and powerful human beings. Sarah, welcome, welcome. This is our second podcast, and I just can't wait to dive in and hear about what's happened since that book came out.
I love it. First of all, I just want to say, especially to all the listeners, that introduction, if we were to substitute 10 years in retreat for 10 years of motherhood, it absolutely describes Debbie as well. This Seriously, as you were speaking, and which is one of the reasons why I fell in love with you and your work, when I came out of those 10 years in retreat, really getting that the pathway to the enlightenment or the awakening or the transformation I was seeking was to include the body, not to exclude it. Nia was a formative part of my practice and my development of that integrative approach. So I just want to offer that gratitude to you and the sisterhood and all that you bring in lifting us all up. And you are that beanstalk as well, which is why it's fun to touch in with each other over the years. And I will say, I published the second edition of that memoir just this year,
Oh, fantastic.
and I added the word redefining being selfish to the title.
Nice.
Yeah. And because in that first publication, it was a little bit too edgy for people. And in the last decade since I published that first edition, self-care is now its own industry. It was really right. And there's shadow sides to it. In we can talk about some of those if we wanted to, but so there's this notion of redefining what does it mean to be selfish? And it to me, it is that self-inquiry process that if we can begin that process, not to exclude relationship, because none of it is separate, but just being willing to put our attention on the inner work and the self-inquiry. Who am I? Why am I here? Do I have a soul? Is there a God? What's the point? Am I in trouble? Am I going to hell? Should I have a career? Should I have a family? Um, I mean, there's a lot of
It's a
decisions.
messy business.
It's a messy business.
Prior to this call, I was talking to several teachers, and we were talking about self-care, and I shared, a tool that my husband had told me he used, and I didn't believe him. He said he never told his children no. He all first, he always started with a yes. That was a form of self-care that expanded and was inclusive of the relationship of others. So what would happen is we'd be in the grocery store, right? And his kids would say, "Oh, Dad, could we have that?" And he'd say, "Oh, yes, that would be so fun. I love that. Not tonight, though."
Mm.
And so they there was never this door shut into the connection and into the conversation. And I love the fact that you added the word redefining. Because I really think that that's where we are right now. We're redefining how to communicate with ourselves,
Yep.
how to communicate with others, and how to address our needs at the same time realizing that the whole world does not revolve just around us. It is inclusive of that cosmo kind of thing. Um, what first called you to step away from that solitude that you were experiencing for 10 years? What was it? Did you get a nudge? Did you get it? What was it?
I think the first answer to that question is to answer what was it that was the initial nudge that sent me there?
Oh,
And
okay, great. Mhm.
which then it'll make sense for the other pole how that came to being. But the initial nudge to get me there was asking all these questions, like the ones I just named, and feeling like I wasn't getting answers that made sense in my whole being. They might have made some logical sense, but my body was like, ew, or they might have, made sense in my body, but my mind was like, no, there's something off about it. So there was this incoherence.
Yeah.
And then I met this fella named Sam in the book, and he basically was living a monastic life on his own. He had bought land in Southern Oregon, and you can read the book to find out how I met him and all that stuff. But basically, the invitation was to sit down, shut up, and listen.
Wow.
And of
And
course,
I would think, you're a creator. You've got a busy mind. You wanna know, and then you're told, "Sit down and be quiet."
that's right. That's right. And imagine hearing that. Now this was, the late '80s, early '90s. Now imagine hearing that now with all of our we have this new neural web of
Exactly.
technology that is so busy and so noisy. And so the invitation was to sit down, shut up, and listen that was compelling to me on every center, body, mind, spirit. Except I was in my 20s and I had student loan payments and I had a career and maybe a family, and who has time? Who has this was the thing, who has time to step out of your life?
Wow.
And my response to people nowadays is, who has time not to step out of their life? Now, you don't have to do 10 years. I did that for you. But
Thank
But
you.
but, 10 minutes we can talk about 10 days, we can talk about a certain choreography that matches the cadence of life now, and each individual to carve out time to sit down, shut up, and listen. And so in the pro and which is what Selfistry does, and the work that I do is help you curate your own self-care, self-inquiry protocols so that you can get to this center is what I call it, maybe sometimes presence that I discovered in those 10 years. And in those 10 years, and I just fell in love with that still, quiet, calm place. It took me a while to get there. I had to not necessarily get through the noise, but learn how to set the noise into the background and bring the presence into the foreground. That's really the art. And so because our minds don't shut up and they're not supposed to,
Yeah.
they're actually quite magnificent
Yeah.
organs, right? So it was really being immersed in that presence and allowing my selfhood to take a back seat. It allowed me, and you'll appreciate this. I think of Blue Belt a lot in this principle because I was able to split from myself. I was able to witness myself. I was able to see all the different parts of Sarah and what she wanted and all of her, unsavory habits and all of her creative all everything came into a witness perspective. And
Mhm.
I was able to sit in the stillness, and then I was able at some point to integrate them, to blend them, to have a relationship between presence and selfhood, you could say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the presence is the portal to the cosmos, and the selfhood also is the portal to the cosmos. One goes in and the other goes out, but it's the same access to the cosmos. So at some point, I got addicted, you could say, to the stillness and the silence.
Yeah.
And I didn't wanna integrate Sarah into I wanted to die in that place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was then that I got the nudge from the still place, not from noise of the world. The still place said, "Sweetie, this isn't the end. Now you must go and integrate your selfhood into this." And I was like, "No,
Yeah.
mom, I don't want I don't want to. Don't make me do this." And then 9/11 happened. And that was the, smack to my system that woke me up and said, "Wow, there's a world out there that I can be of service to, that I can play in, that I can create in. I think I'm gonna give it a shot." And so that was over 20 years ago now.
Wow. Well, I love the way you talk about, I call it yin in
Oh,
and
nice.
yang out. And while I didn't sit in solitude, where I learned about what everything that you've just said is on the Aikido mat. There, to be in energy and to stand and be in this stillness and this quiet so that you can perceive from the now and you can read energy from the now is beyond self-care. It's self-protection, right? But it is a form of self-care, that quiet, that yin. And, I find that oftentimes someone will label themselves as, "I'm very yin," or "I'm very yang," "I'm very masculine," "I'm very feminine." But what you're talking about, that inner sense that you're talking about, that place, that quiet, that womb, that is the place of the feminine that can hold the space for absolutely anything, that in her wisdom will say, "Sarah, this isn't the end. Now you need to go out. You need
Yeah.
to do something." That takes a lot of courage. Um, how has that experience changed you as a woman?
Hmm.
And maybe the word change, maybe the word evolved or inspired or motivated is a better question.
Well, it's an interesting question because so the way I might language it is that still point. There's a lot of different ways to define, masculine, feminine, yin and
Mhm,
yang, and there's so many different traditions that speak to this fundamental polarity, heaven and earth,
mm,
matter and energy, waves and particles, right? It's endemic. It's like the structure of our existence, spirit and matter. And so some traditions will call one pole masculine and the other feminine and vice versa, so it can get a little bit disorienting when we talk about these principles unless we define them, which is
right,
why redefining is really important. Like, "Oh, what do you mean by awakening? Oh, what do you mean by presence? Oh, what do you mean by" and these are the kind of rich conversations that are actually a part of the awakening process. There are people who say to me, "You're so in your head, Sarah. It's so heady." And I said, "Come spend time with me, and you'll realize that these heady conversations we have are actually embodied practices of inquiry." If they're like, like with Plato, if it's the right kind of conversation and the right kinds of questions, we're not going to be analyzing the Kardashians. We're going to be talking about masculine and feminine. Though the Kardashians may fit in at some point as an
right.
example. You never know. So I think for me to be able to recognize that the feminine principle in my being is the integrative principle. It's the one, like you said, that can hold the stillness and the movement. So it's not just the stillness that's the feminine. It's actually, though we could say that's feminine and the movement's or vice versa, but there is this principle. And I was just reading about it this morning in my meditation, um, from a quote by, I always pronounce his name, or Telliard, um, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit priest. Do you know his work at all? You would
No.
love him, Debbie. He's so he broke out of the mold of the toxic Christianity and really awakened into the feminine spirit in the way that you speak so beautifully about it. But basically, he is saying that the fragrance of the feminine, so this is a beautiful word right there, is the attractive power, the world's attractive power. And it's the oneness of the universe that allows for the multiplicity. And that's a feminine principle that holds in unity all the diversity and grows and evolves and survives as a response to allowing the multiplicity, which is exactly the issue of our times from my perspective. We want to collapse into these tribal identities and the feminine, and I think as a woman with the organs of a woman and the hormones of a woman, I have an embodied intuitive sense of loving all my children, no matter, what they look like or do or feel. Like what you were saying that, Stuart does with his kids. I have a huge yes for everybody and everything. So, but I also, and maybe you can speak to this too, I also feel like my husband and the masculine, there's a sacred masculine that does the same, that holds and protects and makes room for that diversity as well. So I don't know. I can be a little wobbly around masculine, feminine, male, female, but I think it's helpful to at least have the conversation.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's helpful to just to describe them as twin energies, yin yang energies. It doesn't matter what body it's in. It doesn't matter how it's presenting itself. Because when we talk about you're talking about the cosmos, we talk about energy, that is the energy of creation. And they work best together. They work best in union. They work best when we consider that one has one opinion, the other has another opinion, but then when they weave their wisdom together, we get this great unified power, this unified life force power. One doesn't live home without the other, right? But in a physical form, how we work with those energies, um, that takes education, it takes practice, it takes, stillness, it takes action, it takes all of those things. Um, as a woman living in a body, aging, how do you love your body and your life unconditionally? And do you? Or are there things that like, "Ooh, this is a tough one?"
Well, when we talk about the feminine embrace of all of it, when my center of gravity is in that, that let's call it presence, um, I don't have like, all of it's beautiful. I can really embrace the like, genuinely, I can sit in my center, what I sometimes call source or the witness or loving awareness. Ram Dass called it, one of my teachers, right? So when that's really my center of gravity, which is the practice, which is the artistry, all my whole life revolves around being able to sustain my center of gravity there so that my actions come out of that place. And in the real world, I don't always sustain it, even though it's always there. So there are moments, there are what I call selves, which are parts of Sarah or selves in Sarah that are in denial, in resistance, are having, a little bit of a tantrum about the whole thing. Um, and I just love them. I just accept that I live in a society that is anti-aging, that is basically sexist, that is like all the things. And I open from that center and say, it's okay, sweetie. You can be scared of getting old. You cannot like it. You can, if you want to, color your hair, get Botox, go on Ozempic, whatever you want to do. We'll talk about it. Yes, I have that same yes. We may not do it now, but let's talk about it. I understand why you want it. And for each person, it's a very, very, very individual journey of how we navigate our aging and our dying, which are very connected. But without that center and that distance, that capacity to see myself, I would be tumbling down a rabbit hole of fear and resistance. I think like many women our age are in that, that post-menopausal. elderhood phase, which our culture does not value or respect at all.
How do you what do you do, and is it important to you to sustain the sensation of feeling sexy, having sex? Is it important to this wholeness that we're talking about? Is it something that we move through as we age? It becomes less important. Where does it fit?
And again, I think the answer to that question is going to be very individual. But what I do notice in my own body, in my own life, and with my, circle of women colleagues and friends is that, and I know you'll understand this because this is something I felt the first time I ever met you when you walked in the room for my white belt, for my new, which was many decades ago. I remember feeling in you this energetic, I'll call it creativity. That my experience of you was that you were already inhabiting the masculine and feminine poles with some mastery. And it ignited that inside of my own body. And I started to recognize that that energy movement, the creative life force, whether I experienced it through an orgasm, through a painting, through a dance or a movement, through a film, through a hot bath, it didn't matter.
Mhm.
That what it was about, again, those poles, which are like electricity. You need a positive pole and a negative pole. That as long as we're tending to those, the form that it takes is less important. And at this stage of my life and my marriage, our sexual lives are more about play and intimacy and delight than they are about really hot, hardcore sex, which
Yeah.
was much more alive for both of us when we were younger, and our hormones were at different places in our body, at different levels in our bodies. So, um, I think that there's room for that creative life force, and I know couples that are celibate or that are no longer engaged sexually that are very vibrant in their bodies and very sexy. They're
Mhm.
just running that energy in other ways.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, when you hear the word desirable, what comes to you?
Well, the first thing that came when I watched you make that motion was beauty, awe, um, life,
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. The keeping certain aspects of ourself alive, whether it's, I'm going to go back to sex. How many people feel like, I just don't get turned on anymore. I don't feel, turn on. And I'll say, do you feel desire? Can you connect to desire? Do you desire to go to a movie? Because it is about connection. It is about that human experience of connection. And whether you're having sex or not, as you said, the creative life force energy is in you. The desire to want to connect, the desire to want to create, the desire to want to have pleasure, whether it's going to the museum, right? Or as you said, taking a hot bath. This redefining, I love that you added that word. How do we redefine what it means to be sexually satisfied or satiated or desirable at any age? And of course it will change, you know? And for me, when I think about the 7 chakras and I think about, at each level, the density of what that energy feels like, the physicalness that it feels like at a certain age, and then as we mature and we go up, how it does expand, it does get redefined, and it does become more ethereal. I think is an important piece of education, particularly to share with women who go through menopause, whose bodies are changing all the time. Not that men don't, but whose bodies are changing all the time. And that can play havoc in how they think and how they feel about themselves. As I go back to that word, beauty, right? Yeah. I've never met a woman who doesn't want to feel beautiful. Never.
Right? Never. That's
And
beautiful.
I have also been told I shouldn't use the word beauty. It's too, it's too confronting. And I'm like, what? You know, it's such an important part of the earth and the world is being able to see beauty and feel the desire to want to be a part of the beauty. Yeah.
And to recognize ourselves as a part of it. I think that, your question of how do we do that, it begins with a willingness to slow down and ask the question, how do we do this? How do we do this now? And what is the this that we're trying to do? And so in the Jewish lineage, which is my ancestral line, there's the word for awe, you'll love this, is yirah.
Your
Which the
ah,
literal your and the literal translation of that is awe. So the teaching is that when you really see, when you really look, and there's a difference between looking and seeing, which I also learned from you, I think in the brown belt. There's a difference between looking and seeing, but when we look and we see, the only quote unquote honest response is awe, is wonder. And it has a tinge of fear in it, like trepidation of the magnitude of the mystery that we are both a part of and we are bearing witness to. And the energetic quality of awe is that sense of beauty internally and externally that you're pointing to. And if we're not feeling it and if we're not connected to it, it doesn't mean we're broken or there's anything wrong with us. It's a recalibration, a
yeah,
redefining, a reorientation, a returning, and a remembering. And we can all do that at any age, at any time.
yeah. I don't know. Would you say that the women in your life uh, taught you how to go to that place of self care in any way, shape, or form, or are you sort of like the new role model in your family?
Oh my gosh, Debbie. I feel like my mom did a great job, bless her heart and soul, in providing a beautiful home, food, clothing, shelter. And
Nice.
she had her own orientation towards beauty and using her hands to cook. She taught me how to knit, and she was a full-time school teacher. So
Yeah.
she but emotionally, the eros piece of it was not as available, right? So, and connecting that to spirit with any kind of spiritual orientation. I didn't have grandmothers or aunties or who had that. So, I would say that in my family system, I am the one who really strove for understanding our spiritual existence. But the irony, like we're talking about, is it was always there in my mother's bread making and in her, creating the house and in the way she dressed. I just couldn't make the connection and neither could she. So it was all really confusing. Like, am I just supposed to look like this or am I supposed to feel like this? Or so I think, our generation and the generations now, my niece was just here visiting me and I live at the beach. And Debbie, we spent an hour on the beach at sunset with her sobbing.
Oh,
Graduating college, a beautiful, bright young woman, and her feeling like the world is so messed up. I
yeah.
don't want a 9 to 5 job. I don't know what's happening in this country. Just and I just was so grateful that I got to bear witness to those tears
Yeah.
in our family system. Like, sweetie, I got you. We can figure this out together. You will find your place. She's like, "I love nature so much. I just wanna be in nature. I don't wanna be in an office." And I was, and I just said, "We'll find a way. There is a way." And so I think I don't know about you, I know you had a close relationship with your mother in a certain way, but don't you feel like you had to forge this pathway for yourself as well?
Yes, and I feel that in their own way, I can see that my grandmother as a single mother, right, raising my dad, um, one of the things that gave her strength was her religion. She was a Christian Scientist. And it gave her a certain self-empowerment that if I can heal my body, if I right, I have a certain kind of power. And I saw how she took that piece of who she was, and it allowed her to ex to have a certain, mastery and presence in the relationship with her second husband. Not that she was controlling, but she had a place. She wasn't, under him, etcetera. Yet she also played the good wife very well. And the same thing watching my mother. My mother was the very powerful voice in our family, but she also played the good wife in letting my dad be the quote, "the man of the house," but she made all the decisions. And, the same thing, the way she cooked, all that energy, that creative life force energy that, she could have been an astronaut, she could have done anything she wanted. She poured it into the house, and I benefited from that. And unfortunately, my children did not get that. I was so out that I forgot the importance of creating the yin in and the yang out. So my kids suffered, from that. So, yes, did I think I had to do that? I didn't even think about it. I just felt this drive to do it. And I can't even say where it came from, except it was just a drive, and it's been driving me ever since.
Yeah, it's powerful, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think had we had aunties or grannies that helped us, again, integrate the yang and the yin, that you would have and I felt like that was the teaching I got in retreat is it's about the dance and the integration, and had I had that guidance, I wouldn't have stayed in retreat for that long, I would have started integrating it from the get-go, right? And that to me is really the practice on the mat, right, in the dojo and out in the world is integrating those. And I'm looking at the Nia symbol right now on my screen. It's the same principle. Yeah.
When you went back to print your book a second time and you read it, what did you feel? Did you feel like, damn, this is brilliant? This is so great. Whoa, this is so timely. What was your experience?
Well, in the process, before I republished the first one, I did publish a second book, which is the book that's called Selfistry, a guide to embodying timeless spiritual wisdom, which is basically the work that I offer, that I teach. So I had the opportunity to distill my learning from those 10 years into this second book. Then when I returned to publish the second edition of the memoir, my desire was to bookend it a little bit more, consciously or bring beauty into the bookends, so redoing the prologue and the epilogue, so to get it gave it like a different container, and changing the title and the subtitle was changed, my journey from escort to monk to me, because grandmother is one aspect of who I am uniquely, which has touched my life, but the me-ness was that integrated self that is not self-absorbed, but that is in self-relation to all of life. And so I feel like the story is super interesting for sure. And I feel like myself as an artist, as a writer, I'm also a painter and, my home, like we're just creative beings. So going back to that eros and that sexual energy, I feel like it's a decent book. It's actually pretty well written. It's a page turner, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm proud of it, and I really I get good feedback on it. It's touched people's life. It's inspired people, and I loved redesigning the cover. I have a new cover, so that was a fun creative project. And I also added at the end a book club question package
Oh,
where
nice.
where I pulled questions that I thought would really activate an inquiry process for each chapter of the book. So, it was fun. It was
Were
definitely fun.
there, well, I'm gonna relate it to myself first. In the process of me writing from time to time, I will have people that they say they're watching out for me, and they go, "You can't share that. You just can't share that." Um, and, I kind of feel like you. It's like, I don't have anything to hide. This is me. Um, I don't judge anybody else for what they do. That's not the way the world is necessarily. Um, were there stories and parts of yourself that you said, "I just can't share," and you don't have to share it, but were there things that's like, "Wow, that could be dangerous."
I think those all made the final cut, and they're in the book.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, and see, to me, that is when you talk about creating intimacy and creating trust, people trust you and wanna come and study with you. That kind of truth to me is really, really important. I think that comes from what you talk about, genuine curiosity. Genuine curiosity about yourself. Who am I? Right? And then you help somebody else dig into that, to begin the work of discovering, who am I? I think we have to look at all of the choices and decisions that we've made. And, I think it's judgment and criticism from society, or perceived judgment criticism, that creates kind of a psychic scar tissue where we feel like, oh god, that's an injury. I should, rather than there are no injuries. It's just part of the process. Some of it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. But wouldn't it be lovely if we could share ourselves, all of our stories, without fear for being shame, blame, cancel, judgment, all that?
And it's a tricky time
It's
to put
tricky.
ourselves out there, it really is, and I think more than anything, the injunction to go slow and to make space and time for this kind of inquiry and to do your due diligence around guides and therapists and teachings and, there's so many options in the self-care and self-development space right now that end up doing more harm than good despite the best intentions.
Mhm.
So there is something to coming to talk to people like you and I who have been in the space for decades, who have a grasp of the territory that can help people find their way in a way that is titratable, is manageable, is nourishing rather than traumatizing or disruptive or reckless in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your experience, have you ever had, a moment when it became very apparent to you that someone on a retreat, for example, just did not wanna take self-responsibility and wanted to project onto you, and did you send them home? What do you do in that case?
My first response, I'm thinking of one time in particular on a retreat was to lean back rather than lean in, lean back and go, wow,
Mhm.
look what's happening here. Like what I thought was happening and what I was trying to do is clearly not what's happening, nor what wants to happen. So, what are you all experiencing? What is happening here? So I didn't isolate that one person, though that one person impacted the whole room. What
Yeah,
I did was I invited us all to take, including that person, shared responsibility. Like, okay, we're definitely not going where I wanted us to go. So where are we going? And do we want to go there?
yeah,
And it worked. It reoriented and we found our way, and Debbie, I've had that experience more than once.
yeah,
It's the nature of the beast,
sure.
and I just do my best to care for everybody in that moment and cut that person loose if they're not ready to really, but I won't cut them loose with a judgment like something's wrong with you. I'll cut
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And not, not the right time. Just, somebody's readiness. And that's that sensitivity that I think you talk about that, in the work that we do, even with the good intentions, it can feel confrontive to somebody. It could feel painful to somebody. They could feel traumatized by what you said. And yet really what it is being sensitive, and even attempting to be a sensitive, there can be that moment, as you say, where it's just not the right time. The person is just not ready to step into that, right? And um be with self,
Yeah.
to, oh my gosh, I saw that, but I don't really want to see it, right? Yeah,
Not the right time, and we might not be the right container for them that,
exactly.
they like, not because we've done anything wrong, but like you said, just our existence, the color of my eyes might trigger them. I don't know what it is. But to just really, again, I think that's where it's really important that we the feminine embraces them in their no. We say yes to their no. And let them know that, because then something in their nervous system will relax the defendedness,
Right.
and they'll still be in a place to get more ready or to find the next person rather than in a reactive, well, all these, new age teachers or spiritual teachers are messed up, blah, blah, whatever. And then they contract even farther. So, and I do feel like when I think of the instances where there was that rupture, that there was enough of space holding and repair that those people have continued on their own development. It just doesn't include me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that that statement, "We don't have to do this alone," and you talk about your niece and, you know, her sobbing and the fear, and I know, uh, with my children, the conversations we've had about feeling afraid and, feeling like the opportunity that I had, they're never gonna have, um, which may be true. You know? So how do we help them navigate in a world that feels fearful, that feels unkind, that doesn't feel inclusive, that doesn't feel unified? It's not one for all and all for one anymore. And particularly if we want to stay open in our heart, it can be so easy to want to close, to want to turn away, to not do something. And I love your comment, "We will figure this out together." And that's that coming together and let's look at this together, that not feeling alone, I think is so very, very important. You know, my mother is no longer here, and now is neither is my dad, and I got some very nasty social media stuff when, Stuart and I were in Venice on my birthday, and it just took me out, and I thought, "Who can I call?" And I
Mm.
called this friend of mine that, has a doctorate in psychology, and I said, "I needed a mom." I just needed a mom, and she was so happy that I called her, that I let her stand in that role for me. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that, it's okay to need that hand, that helping hand, that shoulder, um, somebody to make us not feel alone when we're afraid.
That's so beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. And like we said earlier, that the archetypal big new feminine energy that you speak to so beautifully embraces all of it. The weirdness of these times, the horrors of these times, the fear, like we can hold it all and metabolize it all just like nature does. Nature is symbiotic in order to sustain its unity, and in that symbiosis there is death and regeneration. And though I would definitely advocate for a different form of like our species lowering its birth rate or regulating itself on the planet rather than what's happening in the war zones geopolitically, there's something about the feminine that can say, even that I can hold so that we can awaken to a different kind of relationship with ourselves and with life, that we realize there is only one life and we are all a unique part of it and an essential part of it. So, how do we want to nourish that symbiotic relationship? And how can we hold the process of disintegration and loss and death and destruction and all the things? And it's complicated, it's complex, it's heartbreaking, it's hard, and it's friggin' beautiful and exquisite and alive, and we're here as a part of it, to be it and to witness it. So, I think, sharing that with each other and in community and relationship and family and sisterhood makes it way more easier and way more fun.
Absolutely. And that brings in that the cosmos, that you talk about being part of the cosmos, that we the cosmos holds this vision, right? And it also holds the time and space reality we're in, and it also holds the past, present, future, right? All existing. And the work that I'm doing now called Awakening a New Feminine Spirit is just that. It's kind of like redefining, which is why I bring in the word new. We have got to bring in a new something new. Um, and I think it really is more about redefining in a sense. But to continue to vision, to continue to be present in the chaos that we're a part of and hold center. And to also have deep respect when we look back into history of what worked, what didn't work, and how can we learn from that and be present to what's happening, do something to fulfill the need of what's happening now to move towards a future that for your niece and for my kids will be something that is better for them and something I can die and feel proud of that I gave to that. I gave to that vision
Beautiful. Yeah,
because it
so
is
beautiful.
scary. It is scary. The idea of strength, to be strong. What does it mean to you to be a strong, empowered, uh, human being on the planet?
For me, it means to be honest, to be radically honest. To be courageous and my willingness to be honest around my vulnerabilities and my strengths, what I do know and what I don't know. I mean, the whole notion of not knowing is something that we're so raised to overcome. And I feel like, talking about the feminine spirit, the willingness to be in the unknown and the creative. It's like giving birth, it's this, and I feel like we are in a birth moment as a civilization, as a species, basically. And so in those moments of birth, it's just, I mean, it's timeless, and it in the sense that it takes you into a liminal space, and yet time is so contracted because that contraction is so intense, and it's happening to us and through us and the whole thing. I just feel like to be courageous is to be honest. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm scared, and I'm here, and I'm willing, and um all of it, yeah, feels courageous. Just to be alive in this time and to be having these conversations is courageous.
Well, I feel like we are on, a highway.
Yeah.
Things are moving so fast, and yet we're on this highway, and every so often, we find ourselves at a four-way stop, and it
That's
it
great.
feels like interference, but it's not really interference, but we know where we're going, and we're going fast, and so it's how do we integrate the interference of, a different opinion? We're going this way, and somebody wants us to go that way, or it's a blame or a shame or a loss or whatever it is. To be able to manage life requires really being present. Right. Just and it requires being in that place you talk about, and that still center, being able, and for me, I go back to Aikido, being able to stand and go, "Oh my god, this person is 6'2", and they're 250 pounds, and they're gonna come at me," right?
Yeah.
And so there's where do you go, you know? You gotta find that center, that grounded, that rootedness, that presence, that quiet place so that the universe itself in all of its wisdom and grace and glory becomes a part of who we are. It becomes a part of what we're doing to make things better. And,
Yeah.
you
Beautiful.
I think you say, self-history is about living meaningfully and connectedly, and to me, that's what that means. As we end this up, what has surprised you most about people when they give themselves permission to just be self?
I think that's the one word that consistently throughout the years of me doing this work ends up in the space and in the room. And like your work, my work has a somatic component to it. So we'll have these conversations, like, to do the cartography and to understand the territory and where we might wanna go, but then we get into our bodies and we move in the space. Like, we move into that four-way stop with our bodies, not just our minds, and we notice what our bodies do, and it's super, super beautiful, and that's where that word often comes forward after we do what I call still being moved practice, is, "Oh my god, Sarah, I feel permission to just be wherever I'm at, whether I'm in on the floor sobbing or I'm running around the room feeling like I'm the next messiah, or whether I'm sitting in stillness, or whether I'm observing, all of me is welcome here, and I have permission to fully be all of me." So beautiful, so touching, and so encouraging for the work that we're up to, that when people feel that permission, they actually start taking action in unprecedented ways.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, I can't thank you enough for having this wonderful, wonderful conversation. Sarah, where can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about you? And then the new book I know is called Redefining Being Selfish.
Yeah. So they can just come to my website, selfistry.com, Selfistry, like the artistry of the self.com. Everything is there. And I would love to hear from any of the listeners. Let me know you met me here. That would really touch me.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me in this wonderful conversation about what does it mean to really get into self and live your best life. time is now. Time is of the essence for us to really connect, to listen to that deep inner truth that is there. This is your one body in this lifetime, so we really, really want to inhabit it and use it to create the best life and experience for ourselves and for the other human beings that we are connected to, including the cosmos. You can find more about me on debbierosas.com, where you can sign up. I post 2 new articles about body and life every single week. They'll come right to you. Me on demand, you can sign up for 2 weeks free to experience movement to feel better, to evolve and transform. And you can find out more on Instagram at Nia Technique. Remember, this is our time to get in. Thanks, Sarah, so much, and we'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks, Debbie. It's been a pleasure.